Yeah, I know. It's French, it's old, it's made by Jouef.
Here we go again.
It's going to be problems. So thanks for joining again. In this video we've got this Jouef model to have a look at. This is a vintage model, I got it second hand, and the box is looking not too bad. It's got a couple of scuffs here and there, some tape damage, and it also has this price tag of just £10. I think that's a bargain for this locomotive. I'm not sure how long ago it was that somebody paid £10 for this. I know it's going to be troublesome because it's Jouef and it's old, so you know, when you buy these models you have to take your chances. So let's have a look and see what we've got inside this box. So it's a great looking model, isn't it? I do like French design and they seem to really go to town on their locomotives. When I picked this up, I was hoping it might be a 282 Mikado because I saw one recently when I was at the Railway Museum in Nîmes in France. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. It's a great museum to have a look at and it has a fantastic locomotive in its museum. This one is very similar, but obviously it's a different model. So this is a 231K and you can see it's a 462 arrangement. So as I was taking it out of the box, I realised that this is tender drive because this locomotive is actually quite light and the wheels revolve freely. So this is just getting pushed along from the tender. Looking here at the front of the locomotive, we've got a bit of a problem here, I think. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe that it's meant to have lights or something, but it's just got holes there at the moment. And it has the buffer beam here, which looks as though it's had a few bashes in its time, or else it's just been really badly painted. You can see the number there, 231K, and the other number 82 there, and also the SNCF logo just on the corner there. So that's quite nice. It's got such detail on that buffer beam. We've also got these buffers. They're just in plastic, but they actually look like they could be metal. It's a nice finish that's on them. And then as we look up at the front of the boiler, we've got the typical kind of French style, almost bullet type, very dome-like at the front. A lot of detail there to enjoy, all the rivets and brackets and little catches. Seems to be a separate part fitted onto the boiler here. And up top here you can see the chimney and these parts here which have been added on separately. There's a screw right in the middle of it, which is a bit of a disappointment because that's obviously not prototypical, and I think it's just holding this top part on, although it might actually be holding the body together. And then we've got these great looking smoke deflectors here with little handrails added in as well. This one's fallen down a little bit. Let's see if we can just get that up. Okay, so there you go, that's fitted back on, so that's really quite delicate and it just knocked off there. But it's back on where it should be. And we've got some ladders and some pipework has been added on as extra parts. Some of this is in plastic, other parts are in little wires like this one up here. It's got some rust on it, which is a shame, but this is an old model. And you can see the wealth of detail there all around the boiler as we go down the length of it. And we've got these extra parts fitted on here. I think these are actually made of metal, and then more rivet detail here down near the cab. There's also a red line running the whole length here of the locomotive, and that's really nicely painted as well. So having a look at the cab, we've got some more rivet detail and some fine handrails here molded into the plastic, and we've got some transfers with a number there and some steps here coming down to the ground, which it looks as though it's been painted black, and some of that paint has been worn off here unfortunately. There's also a flash here for the overhead electrics, and you can see that that's not actually sitting square, it's a bit off centre, so that's a bit of a shame, that's not quite right. And then we have the window through to the cab here, but there's no glazing on this model. Looking at the top of the cab, you can see the fantastic profile of this cab with this pointed part here, which is really quite cool. But there is a nice looking vent here, you can see through it there. And there is a bit of a moulding line running the length of this boiler, but it's not too pronounced. You can see it in certain places where it's a bit more pronounced than others, but it's quite nicely done overall. And there's also a wealth of extra little parts being added in here. Some, like I said, some of it is metal, some of it is plastic. Looking further down, we've got the front truck here with some detail moulded into it as well. Wheels here chrome with black inserts. This is held on with this screw to the main part of the chassis and has a lot of articulation here to allow it to get round tighter corners. It does have a coupling at the front of sorts anyway, it's just a hook really, and that's integrated into the plastic of the front truck there. And then as we look at the wheels, again chrome with black inserts, and we've got this chrome valve gear here which works very smoothly. As I'm moving this around, there's hardly any resistance at all, so that's quite nice. We've even got brake blocks there in line with the wheels as well. And then finally we've got the rear wheel, which is much larger than the front two pony wheels, and this part here with some additional rivet detail on it, which is attached to this piece that articulates as well. Some rust here as well, so this model's getting on a bit, so yes, maybe to be expected, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe this has been stored in a loft or something. And finally we've got this part here where the tender attaches to this locomotive. So I'm not seeing any pickup on any of these wheels or any way of transferring power to this model. So I was a bit curious about why we've got these holes at the front. There's obviously no lights being fitted into this at any point. But that's something that maybe you can add in here and make something really nice out of this model. Just a quick note, on the other side of this model we've got the same problem with this handrail. There we go, I've got that fixed now. And there's a different arrangement of parts added on here in plastic as well. And also you have these two metal rods running the whole length of the boiler as well. Inside the cab you've got some detail here on the end of the boiler, which looks really good. And there's even detail down here, some extra rivet details as well. But you do have strange holes in the floor here, and there's no footplate crew either, so it would definitely benefit from that being added in. And aside from the detail on the back of the boiler, there's nothing else inside that cab. So let's have a look at the tender. So much heavier than the locomotive, this is obviously where the motor is, and we have some damage with this step down the back here. I'm going to give that a repair. Hopefully it'll be something quite simple to repair. But you can see here it's in the dark green with the red lining as well, and that's been done very well. It also has some printed numbers here as well, including the SNCF lettering. Not a great amount of decoration on the side of this tender, but it's certainly very characterful, and the moulding is very good with lots of rivet detail and panel gaps here. Around the back we've got the SNCF logo here, a number in the middle, and a 2, and again the flash for the overhead, and another bit of moulding detail here. Another great buffer beam. It's got some details in these buffers added in. They're different to the front of the locomotive. These ones are more squared off, but they're still made in plastic. It looks as though there's some of the red has been chipped away there, which is a shame. And then we've got this big coupling hanging out the back here. It's quite a simple affair, and it's made of metal, but it's quite prominent. At this end we've got a lot of detail moulded into the plastic of the tender. This is obviously where all the action takes place, and you can see this when this is running along, so they've really gone to town with a lot of rivet detail and panels and bits and pieces here. I'm not quite sure what this part is. Looks as though it should have something on there, but it doesn't. There's nothing in the box. You've got another overhead flash here, and then up top you've got the coal sitting up here. It's a pretty good moulding of coal. I've seen some better, but this one's not too bad. It's certainly better than the Hornby ones. And looking up top of the tender here, you've got another wealth of rivet detail and panels and little pieces added in as well. Handrails here too. So this is a really nicely detailed model. There's a lot going on with it. And then looking down below, you've got some steps here. You've got the hook to the locomotive. And then you have the wheels as well. So these two at the back just seem to revolve freely. I guess they pick up. You can see there, Jouef, made in France. And then at the front bogie, you've got the drive to these wheels. They've all got traction tyres on them. And you've got the gearbox here running up to the motor, which is inside here. So there is a bit of warping going on here. You can see that this part just comes away from the chassis a little bit in the corner. It's not evident on the other side, but you can also see it here as well. So the fit and finish isn't super great on this model, but it's not too bad. So I think we should have a look inside this tender, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it apart. I can see that there's two tabs here at this end, so it must hook in here and pull apart at the back, but there's no screws that I can see apart from on this bogie here. You can see a screw right in the middle there. So I'm going to take that off and see what happens. We've got a little tab here, and that corresponds to these little parts on the bogies. So that's quite an interesting arrangement that Jouef have decided to do with this bogie and transferring power up to the main body. Okay, so this is what we've got inside. We've got quite a heavy weight up here, and we can see some of the power transfer from the front bogie here. Okay, so here we have the motor inside the tender and the drive to the front bogie here. So it's quite a simple arrangement, and it's plastic gearing as well. It revolves quite freely, so that's quite good. So I'm going to put some power onto this, just put some wires on here and see if this motor goes okay. Okay, I've just got the chassis held here, and I'm going to apply some power to these contacts and see what happens. So that's great, it's working brilliantly. So I'm going to put this back together and we'll give it a run on the test track. Before we do that, I think we should probably fix this broken ladder here. Looking underneath this moulding here, you can see there's an awful lot of glue going on here. And I'm not sure whether that's from factory or somebody else has made a bit of a botch job on this, but that's certainly an awful lot of glue which is holding parts onto this. So I'm just going to see if I can push the ladder out just by pushing on these points here. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be, but you can see the problem here. This is just all completely bent. And I also think that this railing here is also taking a bit of a bash. So these parts are just made out of plastic and just giving it a bit of a shove. It seems to have sorted it out a little bit. I think that's probably good enough. So what can we do with this? That's starting to look a lot better, so I'm going to try and put this back onto the tender and see what it looks like. So that's not too bad, certainly a lot better than it was when we opened the box. But one thing you've noticed as I've been doing this is that this plastic is very pliable, which is just probably as well because otherwise this would have broken ages ago. So it looked as though this just push fit back into these holes. This hole here on the back of the tender. And while that's not perfect, it's not too bad at all. Obviously this is a weak point on this model, and if this was made out of metal, I think it would be much better because it's going to take a few bashes in the packaging, I think. I think it's time we got this back together though. Tender's back together now, and I'm itching to give this a go on the test track and see how it runs. Before we do that, let's find out how much this weighs. So together this weighs 432 grams. Okay, so this might be a bit of a laugh, but let's see how we go. I'm going to give it some power now and see what happens. Well, wouldn't you know it, it absolutely sucks. But having a look at the wheels here, I can see that there's quite a lot of dirt on these pickup wheels, so I think we should maybe give that a clean first before we write this off as just terrible engineering. Now that we've taken this bogie apart, you can see it is actually quite dirty, and it's also got what looks like a bit of oil on here as well, which it shouldn't have. Also, this is where the coupling just came away as well. It's fitted into here, so if you did actually want to replace this coupling with something more modern, then that should be quite easy to do as well. Anyway, let's give this a clean up. I'm just going to clean these contacts, and as usual I'm just going to use a track rubber for that. So that's looking much better, so let's get these back into the bogie. You should probably try and get these in the right way around actually. Now to clean up these wheels. So these are looking much better now, so I have high hopes we might have solved this issue. So we need to put the tender back together, but first I'm going to clean up the mess everywhere because these were really dirty wheels. Okay, so this is a bit cleaner now, so we can get on with putting this back together. Now, I've just bent these just slightly so that they make more of a contact with the axles. First to go in is this screw here, which attaches the bogie to the rest of the tender. So I'll put that in there. Right, fingers crossed, here we go again. So it still runs pretty badly. I wonder whether it needs some oil. Right, so I've just given it a quick oil, so let's give this another try. Oh, that seems to be working much better now, so great news. So I'm going to put the locomotive back together and we can have a look at this running. Right, we're back together. Let's give it some power. Well, I'm actually quite surprised about this model. I thought it would be an absolute dog when I bought it. It is an old Jouef model, you know, you can't expect much from them. And when we put this on the test track to begin with, it did hold true to form in that it was just absolutely rubbish. But we've given it a bit of a clean and some oil, and now it's running really good, and I'm really quite astonished about that. I didn't expect that from this model. So some of the things I like about this is obviously the overall design. French design is really quite incredible, and this locomotive certainly exudes that French feel. Everything about this locomotive is really stylish, and it's really quite a characterful thing to have. Some of the details on this I really love, including the metal handrails, especially on the smoke deflectors and down the side of the boiler. It's got so much detail and extra parts added on, it really makes it quite an interesting thing to have. They've even gone to town with the detail on the tender as well, and there's lots of rivet detail there and other parts of it which really make it look really quite cool. The downsides are obviously the mechanism inside. All Jouef models are a bit dodgy in this respect. It's really quite fantastic that we've managed to get this running today, but it's still not as good a performer as something like a Hornby model of this era. Another thing I don't like is the steps at the back in the plastic. It's great that it's pliable plastic and it can take a few bashes, but I think it should really be metal, especially because it's quite delicate. As you saw, it was bent when we got it, and it took quite a while to bend it back into shape, and it's still not 100%. And finally, these holes at the front, just above the buffer beam, are a bit odd. I don't know what was meant to go in there, but possibly lights that have fallen out in the past, but it certainly gives you an opportunity to add something like LEDs into here and have some lighting at the front of this locomotive. So should you consider buying one of these things? Well, French railways are always going to be quite an interesting thing to model. They always have great design on their locomotives and rolling stock, and also line-side buildings as well, so you would have a lot of interesting things to model if you did decide to go down that route. This particular model, it's like many Jouef models, which is a bit temperamental. You're going to have to look after it, and if you don't, it's going to turn into a real dog straight away. So it's probably one for somebody who wants to care for their models, and you're perhaps not so interested in having something that you can just plonk on your layout and it'll work every time. So in that respect, I think it's probably an enthusiast's model, and I think it's got a lot of detail on here, enough to be almost a presentation model. It is a bit old, a bit vintage now, but it does have that appeal to it, and I think it's really a great model. And I would totally recommend this to somebody who wants something a bit quirky, but ultimately very rewarding. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of my analysis of this locomotive. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps this channel, and you can subscribe for more videos like this or about real trains as well on my channel on YouTube. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. See ya!